Hey everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of With All Due Respect. I am joined by Dr. Liz Riordan today. Liz is a breast cancer surgeon and a breast cancer survivor, and we're going to talk today about her story, how she had to completely reevaluate where she was going in life, ending up leaving her job as a breast surgeon, helping women with breast cancer, and then having breast cancer herself, and now has become one of the most fierce champions for breast cancer survivors that I know, and I'm really excited to have you on the show today. Welcome, Liz.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks for asking me.
So we became connected through social media, like nearly every other connection that I have these days. I'm really drawn to your message. I'm drawn to you in a number of ways. First of all, because you're frank and forthright, a little bit like myself. You're not looking for conflict, but you're also like, you really want the truth to get out there for women. And I really appreciate that. I love the fact that you've embraced the color yellow. It just makes me so happy every time I see you in something. She's wearing yellow today if you're watching. And in addition to this, you're very honest and vulnerable, and I think that that's one of the most charming things about you, and it's why people because it's hard, right? And you've been through some things, and we're going to talk about that next, but I really do appreciate, and it doesn't go unnoticed, I don't think, by the people that watch you, that when you say I'm not doing well, this is hard for me today, that's when people are drawn to you, because they're like, look, things don't always go to plan, things aren't always.
I think social media is so often people showing us the glossiest seconds of their days, and it's really hard to show, actually, I'm not feeling great, I'm struggling. You don't want people to know, but we have to remember that what we see online isn't real, is it?
No, it's not. And I know I had to make that leap as well when I started talking about my menopause and perimenopause. I was like, I can't keep glossing over this. I have to and then once you're in, you're 100% in. I think that's
and I felt, I do a lot, and I intimidate people. They may think I'm a superwoman. They think, well, how can I ever be part of what Liz is? And that's why it's really important to show I'm not like that all the while. I have good days and bad, so you don't put people off. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you have days where you just sit down on the couch, and that's why your day is going to be, right? Yeah,
exactly.
And she's usually knitting as well. And so I really love Liz's crafty side, because I don't know if anyone who follows me, I'm pretty crafty too. In fact, my Instagram account is crafty AF, because
I didn't know that.
It's small. It really, actually, I have it just for me, just to keep a record of things that I've made. But the pandemic got me knitting again, crocheting again, and I've actually got one of the sewing patterns I'm going to make that you I find it really fulfilling. Do you? And it's the idea of having a hobby, but then having an end product. It's the end product that I really like. Yeah.
And for me, it's carrying on being a surgeon. And it's something to do with my hands in the winter and the evening. And luckily, my husband thinks wool and fabric is free.
Oh my God.
If he knew,
if
he knew how much my stash cost. Yeah, it's all free. That's my stash.
My stash takes up about 4 Rubbermaid boxes. We don't talk about that. Yeah.
No.
But I actually completely didn't associate you being a surgeon with you being so good at all of the crafts that you do. Okay, so can we go to that? Can we go to the beginning of the surgery? So what got you into medicine? What got you into wanting to be a breast surgeon? And then what was ultimately the decision process that you went through to stop doing it, and where you are now?
So my dad was a surgeon, my mum was a nurse. I grew up surrounded by medicine, and it was the only thing I wanted to do from when I was a little girl. I was just fascinated by the human body, and I loved the idea of helping people. And that's the cliche you're not meant to say at medical school, but it was true. And I loved the sciences, and so it was medicine. And I went to medical school in Cardiff in Wales for 5 years, and I fell in love with surgery. The minute I went into an operating theatre and I saw this man pick up a bowel from an abdomen and it was wriggling and he flicked it, I thought, wow, that is amazing. I need to be a part of this. The rugby boys were fainting with the smell of the blood, but no, this was it.
I was going to say, you need a strong stomach.
You do, but actually you do get used to it. I'm not great with vomit. I don't mind blood and maggots and feet and things. Although someone told me you pick your surgical speciality by the body fluid you mind the least, because you're going to see a lot of it. And I just loved, it was like the logic problem. You talk to someone and you think you know what's wrong with them. So you think they might have appendicitis. And then you do a couple of blood tests, but then you get to open them up and have a look and see if you're right. And if you are, and you fix them, they go home the next day smiling. And it was just that sense of, wow, this is incredible, what I can do with my hands. But it's a really hard job training to be a surgeon. It's a very male orientated field. I was often the only woman in my team of colleagues. So there was bullying and sexual harassment, really long hours, 100-hour weeks, and you have to carry on writing papers and doing research and the on call. And part of me thought, I just want to quit. Because I was 30, I had 2 cats, I had no life. It was just work, eat, sleep, repeat. It's really, really hard. And then I discovered breast surgery. And the beauty of breast surgery is that there's no emergency work. Okay, patients don't die if they have a breast cancer overnight. It's all outpatients. So I wasn't doing out of hours shift work. And I loved the dressmaking aspect of it. Because when I first saw a mastectomy, gosh, back in 1998, it was just take the breast off, you cut down over the lump, that was it. But suddenly we were hiding scars and bringing fat in and reshaping and remolding. I thought, wow, every single
there was a
patient
design
was
element.
Completely,
Right.
because a breast is a 3D shape. And it's not just taking the tissue, it's how you redrape the skin and how you hide the scars. I had women flash me in supermarkets saying, thank you, you can't see the scar. I loved that side of it.
So that was life-changing work you were
completely
doing. Right? Because when women go through breast cancer surgery, when they lose their breast, it often feels like they've lost like a real important part of themselves, and it really hits their self-esteem, right?
And I think you don't know what your breasts mean to you until you're told you have to have one removed. Because I found out I had breast cancer when I was 40. I just thought it was a cyst, but it wasn't. And it was large and I needed to have chemotherapy and a mastectomy. And I suddenly realized that my breasts define me sexually. They're how I flirt. They're how I dress. They're how I define myself as a woman. And you can't make a rational decision about mastectomy when they've got cancer. And it's really, really hard as a woman or a man to come to terms with what you're losing, and often it doesn't sink in until months or years down the line.
Oh my goodness. So not only were you like helping women, to go through breast cancer themselves, then you end up having a diagnosis, and that must have rocked your world.
Most women find out they've got cancer or any illness by a series of tests. You have a symptom, you see the doctor, they do a scan, you go back for the results. Right. You have an operation, you go back for the results. You find out if you need further treatment. My mammogram was normal. I had a cancer that's called lobular that often isn't seen because it grows in sheets rather than a clump. And I had an ultrasound and I turned to look at the screen because I do ultrasounds myself. I wanted to know. I saw a cancer.
It's the idea of knowing too much, right?
And in that split second, I looked at the screen, I saw a cancer and I went, okay, that's breast cancer. It's big. I'm 40. I'll need chemo. I've got a good idea what my chance of being alive in 10 years is. Wow. And I just switched off. I was in denial. And I got to ring my parents and say, I'll be telling you I've got cancer in a week. Don't be silly. No, I know I will.
And they're medical. You already said that they were in the medical field.
Yeah, but you never think your daughter's going to get it. There was no family history. And then my surgeon came in, and before we'd even did the biopsy, she said, think about where you want to be treated, because I'm not sure I can, because she was a close friend as well. Okay. And because I've looked after women who've died of breast cancer, I couldn't not see myself in their place. So it's almost like a light went off. Oh. And I was in denial, and it wasn't me going through chemotherapy. It was happening to someone else.
Gosh, that must have been horrendous to go through. I mean, whenever I hear stories of women going through breast cancer, it just breaks my heart. But, also, I don't want to sound, I often don't know what to say in these situations, and I don't want to come across as being cliched, but when I actually see how resilient they are and how they get through it with grace, and it's just, I love it. I love to hear those conversations because they, they just are such amazingly strong women. And so
I think,
but you don't always have to be strong, and
no,
that's where I'm going with this, right? And it's okay
yeah,
not to feel strong as well.
completely. And I think it's whereas someone who chooses to run a marathon, who can't run, and they almost kill themselves slogging around that course, you don't choose to have cancer. It happens to you. You have no choice but to cope with treatment. And you're not necessarily feeling strong. You often feel like shit. I was a triathlete and I couldn't walk up one flight of stairs without stopping to spit and breathe at the end of chemo. You just go through it. But if you've never had it, people can't imagine what it's like. And for me, it was putting on a brave face because my brother was in Switzerland. My parents lived 400 miles away. A bit like everyone going through chemo during COVID. You can have a conversation on the phone, but if you cry about how bad you are, they can't come and give you a hug.
Right. So you were protecting.
So I would cry in the shower by myself when everyone had gone to work. And then I'd put on a brave face when I spoke to, and it was probably the wrong thing to hide my parents from what I was going through. But I thought, you can't come and give me a hug. You can hug each other, but I'm left here crying. So I'll just, and there's no right way of going through it.
No, I'm pretty sure there's not. And I was going to say, did you go through it alone essentially?
Yeah. So chemo was really hard. I had no idea what to expect, even though I thought I knew. And I was the youngest person in the room by a good 20 years. And that the looks of sorrow and sadness, we think, oh my God, and she's so young and she's going through this. Whereas I'm thinking, I'm struggling. How are all these old people coping?
Right. Yeah.
And I did meet another breast cancer patient during surgery or radiotherapy. And it was online that I found my support network. It was Twitter that saved my life, really.
Yes, you're super active on Twitter. I follow you
Yeah.
on it. I really like the advocacy work that you're doing. And it definitely is like a beacon of hope, I think, just the way you talk about things with this complete transparency and honesty. So at what stage did you think to yourself, I need to leave my job, like I can't do this anymore? Because that was a hard decision for you to make.
It was awful.
Your life's work, right?
I had 9 months of treatment and it took me a year to go back to work. And part of the reason I went back was because I'd written a book that was coming out, The Complete Guide to Breast Cancer. And I thought, I can't not be a breast surgeon with a book coming out about it. And I went back, and that was really, really hard, because when I would tell someone they had cancer, I was watching what myself or my husband must have looked like. And I wanted to give them a hug and say, yes, this is awful. But I couldn't, because I still had to be the bad guy. And I didn't want to operate because I knew you could get chronic pain because I had it. And it was really hard. And my colleagues didn't know how to interact around me, shielding me from difficult cases, or can we say that in front of her? It was really, really hard. But then in May 2018, just 2.5 years later, I'd got a nodule of scar tissue, and that turned out to be a local recurrence on my chest wall. So more surgery and more radiotherapy meant that I couldn't move my left arm properly. And that meant that I couldn't operate. And I had to say goodbye to the career I'd spent my life training to do. And I couldn't remember my last operation. I didn't know it was my last. And I just felt empty. I had no life.
Right. That's a really important part of you just gone, right? And
yeah.
But taken away against your will. That's essentially it, right? And it's like the decision was removed from you.
Yeah, I had no choice. And it was my identity. How do I define myself as a surgeon? And not only that, but I'd lost my estrogen, my female sex hormones. I'd lost my hair. I'd lost my breasts. I'd lost my ovaries. I think, am I still a woman? What do? I had no money coming in. It was really, really hard.
Okay. Wow. So you had to have your ovaries removed as well?
Yeah, because my breast cancer came back on tamoxifen, I had to be made menopausal so I could go onto a drug called an aromatase inhibitor. And that either meant 3 or 4 years of injections to switch my ovaries off, which I had and I don't like, or having my ovaries removed. So I chose to have the surgery.
Right. So it was a mitigation sort of strategy. And so, so you've left your job, you've gone into like this forced menopause, you're feeling sort of isolated and without direction. So you've sort of you've hit all of the boxes in menopause that we don't want to tick, right? Essentially. And so the lack of direction and the lack of motivation and knowing what to do next is something I hear all the time, but like I literally think I can't believe how awful that must be to be a surgeon and then say, well, now what am I going to do? So I want to just go back a little bit to something you said, The Complete Guide to Menopause, the book, sorry, The Complete
Breast Cancer, that's Anissa's book.
The Complete Guide to Menopause is our colleague Anise McCurdy.
And that's a brilliant book.
It is, yeah. The Complete Guide to Breast Cancer, and Liz is holding it up to the screen right now. Did you write that after you'd gone through breast cancer or prior to? I mean, I'm just wondering about the timing of...
That's a great question. So when I was diagnosed, I bought 10 books because even though I'm a breast surgeon, I wanted to know what it was like for patients. And I had never been on a breast cancer forum as a surgeon, which is, I'm embarrassed to say, but I started looking for answers to questions. And I was amazed at the kind of things women were asking, like, is it safe to have sex during chemo, or will I make my husband's hair fall out? And I started talking privately to another professor, a doctor on Twitter, who I'd admired for years and years, who was actually having chemo on the same day as me, but no one knew she had it. She bought a different 10 books. And we realized there is so much misinformation. You see stories in the tabloids or miracle cures, and we thought we need to help people. The two of us have had every single treatment. So let's just explain what happens in a really calm, honest, simple language with a load of questions. And because we were scrabbling around on the internet for hours and hours and hours. And if we can just make one resource that would help women, then we've done something.
So 2 seasoned professional doctors couldn't find the answers without having to scramble. So how, and that sort of like is a little bit of like a parallel story to how perimenopause and menopause is. We see that, like, and so how is like the general population supposed to know? And I actually understand why they go down the alternative medicine route and they get drawn into other things, because they're scared and they're desperate.
And it's a sense of control, isn't it? You want to do something.
But as I imagine, as a doctor, that you never let your mind go there, because your work's grounded in science anyway. You already have that box ticked, essentially. And so that was very interesting that you sort of had to then put yourself in the patient's shoes a little bit more.
And I think it's also, doctors tell you what will happen to you. We don't tell you how to cope.
No.
You may tell your breast care nurse, but often it's other friends, it's other patients, and it's patients who told me how to cope. And we just wanted to pass all that information on. And it's not a doctor's job to know, because they are so busy trying to keep up to date with what is happening.
Yeah, no, you're wrong.
The scary thing for me is patients are on the internet believing influencers saying, spend £100 a month on this thing, which will cure you. Think that's bollocks. How can we help patients understand research and trials and the things they're being offered?
It's really, we did an Instagram live. If anyone's listening to this podcast or watching, it's just on my feed, and it was a really important one. And it was frustrating because, you know, we were seeing messages from well-known doctors in the UK saying things like, eat 2 kiwis a day and you can prevent cancers. And it's just really difficult to sort of fight these, like, people have got hundreds of thousands of followers, but it's also such a disempowering message to anyone that's had any type of cancer, because they're probably going to say, well, what if I'd have only eaten this food, I wouldn't have got cancer.
Exactly.
And
they blame themselves.
It puts blame on people as well, right? And so I know that you're very outspoken about that. I really love that about you, though, because that's what we do need to hear in order to remove guilt, shame, because they come as an association, and then that empowers women, because because then that says, okay, so what you're saying is, I can take care of my health through movement and exercise, but none of that will guarantee that cancer won't come back or that I won't get cancer.
And I was a fit triathlete, and the co-author of my book was a vegan triathlete, and we both got breast cancer. We were 2 of the healthiest people. It can still happen. Yeah.
So that's a really important message, because I know a lot of people after cancer will turn vegan, right?
Yeah, they don't need to.
Yeah, don't need to. And so you've got your book, and you also have a podcast now, and it isn't specific to cancer though, is it?
No, I think I've spent a lot of the 5 years talking about breast cancer online and in talks all over the world, and there's more to me than that. And I didn't want to get stuck in a breast cancer rut for the next however many years I have. And I wanted just to talk about other things that really interest me and actually help everybody, not just breast cancer patients, although it's really hard to claw your way out of a niche on Instagram. But I spent most of...
You can have it there as a conversation piece, but it's not a defining piece. And I sort of
Exactly. Yeah.
Your podcast is called Don't Ignore the Elephant.
That's right.
Lots of yellow in it, which I love.
Yes.
And a crocheted elephant, by the way.
It's all about the yellow elephants. I spent most of lockdown talking about sex and dying during COVID, because these are things a lot of people were having trouble with. They were talking to me about, and I thought we need to start people talking about things that you just build up and cause arguments, that you're scared. And if by having guests on to talk about their own personal experiences, I've had listeners write me letters that make me cry just to say thank you. I listened to this with my husband, we're now going to try and have sex, or I'm no longer sad about not giving my mum CPR. And it's that makes a difference, just keeping that community going.
Yeah, and you know, the work you've done on CPR has been enlightening for me, and I have to do CPR for being a fitness professional.
Oh, do you? Of course, yeah.
Yeah, it's a legal requirement and stuff, but it's just that you were like saying things, I was like, oh my God, there's stuff there that I didn't know, and I have to do the training every year. In fairness, I haven't done it for a couple of years because I'm not training anymore, but I did it for like 12 years. Yeah. 12, 15 years. So anyway, if anyone's listening, go and check that out. It's a great podcast. You had that one doctor on, and I loved that episode. What's his name? The really funny doctor who does.
He's Dr. Glockenflecken, Will Flannery.
I can't say his name.
He's Glockenflecken. He's an American ophthalmologist who's had testicular cancer twice and who died of a heart attack, and his wife brought him back during COVID. He's very, very funny, but it was fascinating for me to hear about the American health system and how different it is to ours in the UK.
Oh, yeah. Well, I lived it for 4 years. Essentially, if you've got money and insurance, you're swimming.
It's awful.
And that's that. Yeah. Oh, it's awful. It's awful. And, you know, when bringing it back to the menopause conversation, you know, I see the work that people like Diane Danzebrink are doing just to try and, you know, evolve the NHS. And I'm actually involved with a team of women here in Canada to do something very similar. I can't say too much.
Fantastic.
About it, but I actually spoke to Diane at length about trying to do something in the US, and I just kept coming up with brick walls, because it's literally owned by the insurance companies. And it's I really feel sorry for the women in the US that don't have access to medical care because they simply can't afford it. And your insurance is often linked with your employment. So if you're not working, it's terrible. It's terrible. But so what I'd like to talk about next is, so you've moved from being a surgeon, you're this brilliant advocate for women, a really sane voice, but you still have struggles, right? And like I said, you're very open and vulnerable about things, and I really like that. But could you sort of share a few of the things that have been sort of really impactful on you from a physical and even, you know, neurological standpoint since you've gone into this medical menopause? Like, what things do you struggle with? And on the flip side of that, what type of solutions or what type of actions do you take to just, you know, move on from those?
That's a really good question. The first, I think, was my fertility. Because I'd been married for a couple of years, we hadn't yet decided to have children, and part of the consent for chemo was it would probably make me infertile. And in 30 seconds, I had to decide, no, I don't have kids. No, it's fine to not have them. On to the next thing. And it was only when I was told I could never have children again that I realized I really, really wanted them. And that's something a lot of women go through when they have a premature menopause. And it's still, although I've got step grandchildren, I've got nephews and nieces, I'll never teach my own daughter or son to knit. I'll never teach them to bake a cake. It's not the same. And I find that really, really hard. And especially as a woman who's nearly 50, most women my age have their own children, and often it's all they want to talk about. And it's very hard to not feel left out of those conversations.
Yeah, that's really hard, and again, it's a choice.
Or Facebook on the back to school days, it's like, no, I don't want to see it. Or Mother's Day, it's really, really hard, but time is a great healer. And I think a lot of people think, haven't you moved on from that? But people who are in a similar situation will get it, and we all reach out to each other on difficult days. But I think that's always really hard when it's not your choice.
And do you create boundaries as well? Like, so that, like, you know, on those days you won't go on social media, you know, do you create things to
I
protect
do.
yourself somewhat? Yeah.
I do. And I try and build myself up when I'm going to spend time with my step grandchildren, just to try and, but this, you'll just get a moment to think, oh,
Yeah.
I want my child to look at me like that. Those moments are really, really hard. And I have a lovely dog, but it's not quite the same. I think the thing I found really hard though was the changes to my body.
Okay.
The chronic pain, the stiff joints, the weight gain, the water retention, not being able to move my arm properly, feeling slower, physically being slower as an athlete, and having to accept that I was going to go through the menopause anyway, but it happened 10 years earlier, and having to learn to adapt and reset my expectations and give myself a break and realize I didn't do any weight training before the menopause, before breast cancer. I would join a gym and go once. And now it's so important for my bone health, let alone to reduce the risk of recurrence. And I'm now really proud of what my body has been through. But it's really hard accepting. There's days when I don't look in the mirror, or I won't look below the neck because I don't want to see the scars, and that kind of dissociation between, and I look at photos of myself pre-chemo and during treatment. I think that's not me. And it's like I've been 3 different people in my life, but I've
Like
almost shut out.
Like you've completely from that time.
Yeah. She doesn't exist anymore.
Mm. And maybe that's a protective mechanism that you.
I think it is.
Yeah. And, you know, I think it's really normal, and I think it's human nature to have those days where, even if you haven't been through what you've been through, to be like, oh, I can't see that today, whether that's correct or incorrect. I think it's human nature, and that the work can be done, you know, to evolve from that. But you've had this extra layer of this.
I have. And I've had depression all my life. And again, the chemotherapy, the mood swings, the menopause. I was really, really bad at Christmas. And I'm always terrible at recognizing the warning signs. Often with me, it's sleep and eating, and actually saying, no, I need help. I'm not normal. It's okay. It's not your fault. You can get help. And by talking about my problems with depression, I get so many women saying, thank you.
Yeah.
This is something we all go through, especially with a couple of years you've all had. And my hardest thing is learning to say no. I get so many requests, and I love helping people, and I want to give everybody advice and answer every single comment, but I spend my life on my phone. And it's realizing, and I'm not very good at doing this, drawing those barriers and saying, okay, I have to look after myself first so I can help others. I've
got to the stage now where I can do that. I've worked really hard as well. And I sometimes think that it came from a jaded standpoint, because there was the women that reached out generally wanting personal help, but then there'd be like other people looking at me going, well, she's got an inbuilt audience there, why don't I jump on top of it? And I'd be like, hey, go away. And so I think once you say no once or twice, it becomes a little bit easier. And then and I make my choices based on my value system and how that fits in with the strengths that I've got, and it sort of has made those decisions to say yes or no a lot easier. But you know, going back to your talk about depression at Christmas, I could see it in your eyes, and anyone who's listening to this that's had depression, I had it terribly through perimenopause, and I'd never had it my whole life, so it was a new phenomena for me. But I could see it in your eyes, and I was like, oh yeah, it made me go, so
the light goes out and you can't see it.
But the people around you, I bet your husband recognized it, right? I bet your husband was like, this woman needs support again.
And it's that, but that's, I've become very good at hiding it. I think when you've had depression a lot, you don't want other people to know. And often when I'm at my smiliest, especially when I was at work, is when I'm at my most depressed. It's that kind of that mask. I'm fine, leave me alone, no one needs to know. And then it's a real shock when you do tell them.
And sometimes people just can't handle it and don't want to know, and it pushes them away from you. I know it's really hard place to be, for sure. So so you said that one of the things that you struggled with was, you know, the joints and the lack of mobility, but I want to sort of like pick the conversation up just a bit more of a bit more uplifting. So you found, I'm a lifelong runner, and I actually like running because it's the head thing.
You're mad. Running, I hate running.
Well, I can't run at the moment. I've got Achilles tendonitis that I've had really 5 months, and I'm like learning to adapt. I'll go on. But anyway, strength training is the linchpin of everything I do, and that I always like drawn to people that like really appreciate the benefits of it. So I mean, I saw a picture that you posted it with you doing a gun show, and I was like, damn, sexy woman. Like, so
the reason I did that, I thought, right, I hate looking at pictures of fit athletes thinking I could look like that, but I've never been asked to put the work in, especially the diet. But I'd complain, oh, I don't like myself, I'm not doing it. So I got an amazing online coach through lockdown, and most of it was done with resistance bands and a couple of dumbbells. And I ate properly, and I tracked my calories, and I trebled the amount of protein I was eating. And 3 years after breast cancer, being menopausal, I lost 10 kilos and I got in the shape of my life. And I wanted to prove that anybody can do it. And it was so empowering to think age is not a barrier to looking fit and feeling strong.
No, and you can define how it looks.
Yeah.
Like, you can decide how you're going to age. And what's, I think, missing from the conversation, it's not missing, I don't want to say that because I know lots of us are talking about it, but it's not up there at the forefront.
The mainstream media aren't talking about it.
No, and it's that how you harness your life in mid-health is one of the biggest indicators of your longevity and long-term health, right? And so even women that say to me, well, I can only work out for 10 minutes, I'm always too tired, and there's no point doing it through perimenopause. And I keep repeating, it doesn't matter if it doesn't feel like it's doing very much, and it doesn't matter that you're not seeing great changes. You're doing something really positive for your overall health, and that's sometimes not enough for women, but it really is so huge, and you've just sort of confirmed that.
Just 10 minutes of really fast, sweaty walking a day is enough to delay the onset of so many aging diseases.
Yeah,
it's that simple.
It's super simple, and walking's being studied ad nauseum. There's so many studies out there that we can throw at women to show that. And it's underrated, in my opinion. The strength training, did you find, so when you have mastectomy and it can definitely sort of halt range of motion through the shoulders, and I know that I've worked with breast cancer survivors, did you find that your range of motion improved with
I did. I had almost a frozen shoulder on the left-hand side. It was very limited. And I hate, because I'm used to being strong and I want to lift heavy weights. And I had to start with 1 kilogram dumbbells to do a lateral raise and a shoulder press. But this is ridiculous. I can lift much heavier. But they said, no, stick with a really light weight. And in about 6 months, my radiotherapy scarring improved, my range of movement improved, I got stronger, I was lifting the weights. It is the best thing I have done to keep my shoulder active.
Yeah, for sure. And the point of me asking that is because, research shows that, just doing static stretching and just doing mobility exercises usually isn't enough to stimulate.
And it's boring, and you can't track your progress.
No, but it's usually not enough to like stimulate real improvements in range of motion. And so I'm glad you worked with a professional about that. So as we come to the end of this interview, which I've really enjoyed, by the way, I could just keep chatting with you.
I know.
I have a question that I've been asking people at the end, and I've sort of thrown it at you without any warning, is that how do you feel the conversation has evolved around midlife and menopause in a positive way? Like, I don't want to focus on the negatives. How do you see that we've made leaps and bounds, and then what would you like to see moving forward?
Oh, great question.
I know.
I think it's good that people are talking about it more, mainly so men will understand what women go through at this time in their life. I think I kind of see my mum and all her friends, it's just the menopause. There's no sympathy. And I think to help people understand, this is something that happens to every woman, and she can't help some of the changes she's going through. So can you be a bit more sympathetic or understanding? I think that's really helpful. And again, in the workplace, hopefully older women will be given a little bit of leeway. We are still very capable of doing our jobs, but we might need to strip off every 10 minutes or not be able to multitask or do 5 things at once. And I think that will really benefit women in their relationships in the future. But it has almost become the latest thing for everyone to hop onto. The world and his wife is now selling menopause products. And I wonder whether it's gone too far and it's almost like a gimmick to cash money in. But I think getting it out there and talking about it is a brilliant thing.
And I think people like you and I, and most of the guests that I've hand selected to come on here, have that same ethos that, we have to stop making menopause a commodity, but we have to be able to find valid solutions for women in a really ethical way. Integrity matters so much, and a lot of these products have no integrity, but
no.
hopefully if we highlight any of those. I've got a little rant coming up soon anyway.
I'll watch out for it. It's a natural thing that happens to every woman. Like men lose their testosterone, and that changes their body shape and their hair loss. And, it happens to everybody when they get older. It's natural. It's not a bad thing. It just happens.
Yeah, it's just different, right? And then I think sometimes
it's like puberty. You don't stay like a 10-year-old girl forever. You go through puberty and then you go through the menopause, just as men go through that as well. It's just part of life. It shouldn't be a big evil thing to fear.
Yeah. And removing the fear is literally the reason I'm doing things like this. And I know it's why you're doing the work you're doing, because we need to give women the tools to be able to sort of push forward and thrive. And
a lot of women sail through it and don't have any problems at all. Because if all you read is oh my God, it's terrible, it's the end of the world, you're going to work yourself up into a state.
Well, actually, that's a great point. And I was speaking to my husband about that the other day. I was saying, I was reading a survey where 80% of women are impacted in the workplace. And he said, well, the thing is, that's sort of a bias. That's I can't remember
exactly. No, but it is.
The only people that would have been reporting that are the women that are suffering.
Exactly.
And so I understand that sort of element of it, but I'm not trying to ignore those 80%, but there is other people out there that, are doing well. And I like to hear from them too, because I think it revs people up and thinks, okay, I can do this. I know I can. So,
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, Liz. Before we go, where can people find you? Where would you like people to find you?
Oh, in a cake shop eating a cinnamon bun after a bike ride, but that's not what you wanted.
I'd love to knit with our knitting.
Yes. So on Instagram, I'm at O'Riordan Liz. On Twitter, I'm at Liz_O'Riordan. And my website is liz.o'riordan.co.uk.
And can they find the podcast and the book on your website?
Yes, the podcast is Don't Ignore the Elephant, and the book, The Complete Guide to Breast Cancer, that's on the website and it's pinned on my Twitter page. If you just type my name into Google, you'll find everything.
Great. And I will link into the show notes too, so people won't scramble around. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Amanda.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.